At 39 and 40 years old, Messi and Ronaldo are still terrifying world football. In this past week alone, Messi scored the 60th hat-trick of his career, and Ronaldo scored a goal of the season contender. So how are they still going, and when is this going to end? Well, what if I told you that there are way crazier examples that even make these two legends look like infants? Later in this video, we'll be looking into a man who's almost 60 years old who's still playing professional football at a high level. But how is any of this possible? Over the past few decades, studies have shown that the average age of retirement for footballers has increased from around 31 to 35 in the 1990s to around 34 to 36 in the 2020s. Although the link between age and market value has remained constant, there's an undeniable increase in the age of retirement in the sport, as they're able to squeeze out a few more seasons at the top level in the modern game. Not only are the most senior players older than ever before, but the average age of entire teams is also on the upward trajectory. A recent study conducted by the University of Vigo in Spain examined all 16,000 players who participated in the Champions League between 1992 and 2018. They found that during this 25-year time frame, there's been a significant increase in the average age of these contestants, from 24.9 to 26.5. Considering this is basically a one-generation age gap, that near 2-year increase is actually quite a big jump, especially when observed in such a large group of players coming from all around the world. For example, the average age of Inter's starting 11 in the 24-25 Champions League final was 30 years and 19 days. Now, we don't need to talk about how they got run circles around them by the extremely young PSG, but the fact that they were able to beat out every other team in Europe while being in their 30s on average is pretty impressive if you ask me. In addition to this increase in average age, the outliers, the lucky few who get to play well past most of their colleagues, have also gotten older. More and more players are reaching their late 30s and even their 40s, which is something that seemed impossible a few decades ago. Players like Ronaldo, Thiago Silva, and the recently retired Ibra were still making a difference on the pitch after hitting their 40th birthdays. So now that there's concrete evidence coming out confirming that more players than ever are playing into their 40s, the next question is, naturally, well, how? It seems ridiculous that a professional footballer could be banging in hat-tricks in a top league when he could literally have a son who's competing in the same competition. There are countless reasons for this longevity we're seeing in today's game, but they can mostly be put into 3 different categories: medical advancements, discipline, and tactical changes. The first and arguably most influential of these categories is the scientific and medical advancements that have taken place over the past few decades. The main driving factor behind this is the increased investment in research, staff, and facilities from the biggest clubs in the world. 20 years ago, even some of the most influential clubs may have just had a few trainers working with 1 to 3 physios in the locker room. These days, clubs are spending anywhere from 2 to 10 times more money on these now multidisciplinary departments, including physios and doctors, R&D, performance analysts, nutritionists, and even psychologists. In addition to these teams growing in size, those in mid to senior roles are now also being paid better, reportedly 2 to 3 times more than they were around the turn of the century. This is due to how much more complicated and detail-oriented sports science has become over the past few decades. In the olden days, a player might receive a knock or a small injury during the game, but be told to just walk it off and play until the final whistle. Especially considering the fact that there were only 3 substitutes allowed per game, managers had to choose these changes wisely and often couldn't afford to take players off. After the full-time whistle, they might be looked at briefly in the locker room, told to ice it and show up to training the next day. The player may just go home, lazily ice their injury, have a pint or 2, and then show up to training the next day and pretend like nothing happened. This mistreatment of injuries can sometimes be harmless at first, but they can stack up over time and even reduce range of motion and function later in their careers, especially if it's an injury that's constantly aggravated and they keep playing through. If this were to happen in a modern day game, things would look a lot different. The extensive medical staff would be waiting on the sideline to be ushered over from the official. Play would be stopped, and the injured player would be examined and likely wrapped up or sprayed with vapocoolant to reduce swelling and pain in the affected area. After determining if the player is fit to continue, they would either let play resume or take the player off, using only one of the 5 allotted substitutions. After the match, the player would be examined again by medical staff, who would have his medical records on standby, including injury history, reactions to different medications, and other important biomarkers to come up with a treatment plan. They may be asked to be a limited participant in training the next day and would instead spend most of their time on recovery and monitoring the severity of their injury until they fully healed and can return to match fitness. In addition to injury treatment changing over time, injury prevention has also evolved a great deal in modern football. Players are put on specific high-protein diets tailored to their training plan to maintain muscle mass and bone density to reduce chance of injury. They'll constantly wear devices that track important metrics, whether that's a Whoop ring to measure their sleep and recovery quality, or a training top that monitors their heart rate and distance covered. But the tools that these players are given can only take them them so far. After all, half of their time is spent away from the training ground, whether that's at home with their families, out at social events, or away on vacation during the off-season. These players are given all of the information they could possibly need to maintain a healthy lifestyle, extending their careers well into their mid to late 30s if they avoid any major injuries. However, it's up to them to stay disciplined and avoid temptations off the field. Partying, drug abuse, poor diet, and other stressors can not only shorten even the best players' careers, they can end them entirely. Research and development mean nothing if you don't put the actual work in. Some players may look rapid and sharp as teenagers and in their early 20s, and can get away with partying, drinking, and eating high-calorie, low-quality foods with no nutritional benefit. However, as time moves on, these poor lifestyle choices will catch up to even the greatest of talents in world football. Let's take a look at one of the greatest talents of all time, Neymar Jr. As a young prospect in Brazil, he was one of the most rapid players in world football, with incredible agility and change of direction because of his size and body composition. He might have been the weakest player on the pitch, but his fast twitch muscles and explosive acceleration was a strength of his own, making players twice his size look like traffic cones. He was able to stay at this top level and athletic ability in his mid to early 20s at Barcelona, despite his involvement in some not-so-kosher activities off the pitch. He was known as a partier and a club goer, saying that this was something that helped him clear his head and balance his life out. And considering he was still able to keep pace with Messi and Suarez at Barcelona for a few years, no one really batted an eye at this secret bachelor lifestyle he had away from football. Whether it was an all-night video game binge, an extravagant party, or an online gambling bender, people really didn't seem to care, considering he was still humiliating the League of Defenders week in, week out. However, when these stressors compound over time, they affect recovery, sleep, and focus, which can all speed up the aging process. Don't believe me? Take a look at Wayne Rooney and Cristiano Ronaldo. Rooney looks like he could be Ronaldo's dad. Well, more like creepy uncle. But Ronaldo is actually a full year older than the Englishman, making them a perfect example for demonstrating just how much lifestyle choices can affect how you age. Can you imagine Rooney still starting up top for England in 2025, bagging a goal a game? And bringing this back to Neymar, these thousands and thousands of small decisions he made in his 20s are now starting to catch up to him. Since leaving PSG in 2023, at age 31, he's been out injured 613 days. That means that he's only been match fit for 22% of the time over the past 2 years. And even when he is deemed match fit, his recurring knee and hamstring issues seem to still be significantly slowing him down on the pitch. His ability and genius are still there, sure, but he can't execute the way that he could back at Barcelona. It's hard to believe that he's half a decade younger than his ex-teammate, Messi, especially when comparing their recent matches side by side. But enough of the sob stories. What does it look like on the other end of the spectrum? Players who've taken incredibly good care of their bodies and are able to reap their rewards. Introducing the incredible Kazuyoshi Miura, the 58-year-old professional footballer. That's right, 58. Born 20 years before Rooney and 25 years before Eden Hazard. After playing in Brazil, Italy, and Croatia, Miura is back in his home nation of Japan, playing for J1 League side Yokohama FC, where he's been playing at for 20 years? He played for the Japanese national team from 1990 to 2000, scoring 55 goals in that time, making him the second highest goal scorer of all time for them. The key to his longevity doesn't involve some secret remedy, an incredibly complicated stretching routine, or even a very strict diet. The most important factor in Miura's longevity seems to be just listening to his body. For sure, it takes me longer than the other players to recover, he says, but even though it's very hard, I have this passion of wanting to play, so that keeps me going. Passion, consistency, and knowing your own pace seem to be the pillars supporting the best players who still compete in their 40s and beyond. Ronaldo, Ibra, and Miura all share a deep and profound love for the sport and competition. All of these world-class professionals have the same access to top medical staff, treatments, and fitness plans, but it's the work they do outside of the training facility that truly allows them to get the best out of their careers as they age. Another crucial strategy implemented by aging players is changing their roles and positions within a team. Going back to the study from the University of Vigo, one of the biggest findings was the difference in peak age by position. For example, forwards and wingers typically peak around age 25, whereas defenders and goalkeepers can reach their peak anywhere from 27 to 31 years old. Using time motion analysis, these studies have shown that forwards perform both a higher number of and longer maximal sprints, more contact at high intensity, and higher amount of high and very high intensity activities. Defenders spend the least time running and sprinting. The lower physical demand for defenders is likely one of the reasons they tend to peak at a later age, as well as maintaining a high performance higher up in age. In similar fashion, the higher amount of high intensity activity is probably one of the causes for the earlier peak of forwards. This understanding of the difference in physical demand by position has been key in extending elite players' careers into their late 30s and early 40s. Instead of a top winger just hanging up the boots when they've lost a few pace points, they can now be shuffled into a cam role or perhaps a false nine striker. Now, this really only applies to the best of the best in world football, as those who can't quite make the cut once they reach their mid-30s are simply not offered a new contract, or retire and move to a lower level of competition. However, those who are deemed too important to a team are often reassigned to a less physically demanding role, and this has become a more common practice over the past decade. Ronaldo made a name for himself terrorizing fullbacks on the wing in the Premier League, but since leaving Real Madrid, he's now strictly a number 9, poaching goals in the box. He stays central and makes fewer runs in behind, but is still used for his lethal finishing, physicality, and positional awareness inside the box. Playing into these strengths has allowed him to continue his prolific goal-scoring record even in his 40s. Messi, on the other hand, has shifted from the wing to a deeper midfield position, often playing as a cam for Inter Miami and Argentina. He's always been somewhat of a positionless player, given the freedom to roam the pitch and pick up the ball pretty much anywhere. This has been a crucial asset of his game, helping him still decide games by himself at the age of 38. He's given little to no defensive responsibility and is often seen walking around the pitch, almost like he isn't trying. But this is just him waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike and destroy the opposition in transition. You see, he can still reach close to his top bursts of speed with the ball at his foot, but the difference these days is more the frequency of those sprints per game. Similar to Mura, he knows his body incredibly well at this point in his career, and to minimize injury risk, he knows to exert himself fully only a handful of times per game. He can achieve this by dropping into the midfield and becoming a deep playmaker for a few minutes at a time, avoiding the need for intense sprints or high contact situations. The same thing goes for other legends of the game, such as Luka Modric or Neymar. Modric has transitioned from a box-to-box powerhouse to a deep-lying defensive playmaker, and Neymar has transitioned from a tricky playmaking winger to the physio's room. The combination of tactical changes, investments in sports medicine, discipline, and most importantly, the love of football are all reasons why we're seeing more players than ever playing well into their late 30s and early 40s. Players such as Ronaldo, Buffon, and Ibra have laid the blueprint for generations to come on how to compete at the top level, even when you begin to gray. Who knows? Maybe in a few decades from now, it'll be typical for people to play well into their 40s and 50s, just like Kazuyoshi Mira has. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. YouTube thinks you'll also like this one. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. See you next time.